to the Wandering Dotterel. Statistics are staggering regarding the maltreatment of children. The child abuse rate, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and psychological maltreatment of children is absolutely gut-wrenching. According to statistics regarding the ACE, or Adverse Childhood Experience Test, shows that 89% of victims are maltreated by one or both parents, which helps us understand the long-term effects of child abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. The screening tool shows the personal individual history and traumatic events that happen during childhood. The test follows childhood experiences such as physical, sexual, verbal abuse, and separation or divorce of family members, and also those with mental illness or addiction issues such as drug or alcohol abuse, where the children witness a parent being abused. The American SPCC is dedicated in prevention of childhood maltreatment, raising awareness of the impacts of childhood trauma and adverse childhood experience. It's seriously unfortunate when a kid that's now an adult can look back and say that the trouble started before I even knew what was going on. Take, for instance, me trying to bang my head on kitchen knives because of the yelling and the screaming and the fighting, the verbal confrontation between my parents, the physical confrontation of my father slamming doors, screaming at my mother in her face, trying to kick my mother, and me being a little kid at 2 years old biting his ankle while my dad's trying to kick me off of his leg, and me screaming, "I'll text you, mommy," only later to be told by my mother that I wasn't part of her family, and then being pushed away, isolated, and injured, and possibly tragically, and never getting a caring follow-up of any kind, never being told, "I love you, I care about you, it's gonna be okay." I never heard that. And then later to be surrounded by step-parents after my parents' divorce, just a few short years later, being 4 years old, and being sexually assaulted by a teenage boy who was old enough to know better, and having step-parents once again treat me 100 times worse than my own parents, and then having my parents follow up on their abuse. It's tragic. It's unfortunate. And those memories don't go away. I've spent a lot of time over the years staring into space. And they call that a flat affect. Not caring what other people think. Me not caring. Me not having emotions. Me not having long-term relationships or friends, or just seemingly walking around in a fog. And because it's all of the way I was raised from a very early age during my formative years. And the formative years are ages 3 through 7. And I can honestly say that those were horrible, unfortunate, tragic years for me. And it only got worse past 7. Because the incest started, the sexual abuse, being left alone, being isolated, being beaten, spanked with a belt, my ears twisted, my hair pulled, screamed at in my face, shaken, hit by a car, left unattended in the woods while my parents did whatever they were doing, with other children that were out of control because they didn't know what was going on and they were being abused, and they took it out on the other kids, which I was younger than most of the other children. And so it just turned into a huge mess for me by the time I was a teenager. And of course I was the blame for their behavior and the way I turned out as a teenager. It's hard to forget that stuff, because that stuff is what made me lash out on myself later. And that turned into me trying to drink myself to sleep, out drinking the adults before I was 12 years old, smoking cigarettes when I'm a little tiny kid.
Oh no.
And having boys from the neighborhood expose themselves to me, having them show me their privates and trying to fornicate with me when I'm a little tiny kid, and I had no idea what was going on. And I was very young when I started to try to take my own life. And all I heard was I was a weird kid, I was out of control, I was a bad kid, that people remember me being weird. And I was like, well, it's unfortunate that you don't know who I am because you don't understand what I went through. Shame on you. And I'm not saying that's the way the cookie crumbles. I'm saying we have to stand up for ourselves. If there's anybody out there that's gone through anything like I've explained or shed light on, it's time to educate yourself and not raise your children that way, because it's wrong. This is your host, the Dingy Dotterel. Thank you, Spotify. If I were to be honest about my upbringing as an adult, looking back on my childhood, I would have to say the thing that hurt me the most wasn't always the abuse. It wasn't always the physical abuse. It wasn't always the narcissism that hurt me in the long run. It was the lack of follow through on my parents' part and my step-parents' part and those around me that are adults that said nothing about them loving me. They never said that they loved me or they cared for me. They didn't hug me. They didn't have compassion for me. They didn't use positive reinforcement. They didn't use kind words. The air I got was be quiet, be seen and not heard, go to your room, I don't want to hear it, you're wrong, I'm right, sit there, do what I say, and don't say a word. And then the comparisons to other individuals as I grew up. And mind you, I was shifted from home to home because my parents divorced very early, and I witnessed a lot of intimate partner violence, domestic violence. I was entangled in sexual abuse by adult men and children that were older than me, both incestuous sexual assault and physical assault and sexual assault by other individuals outside of the home that were related to me. And it took me years to confront any of them. One alone was a parent that to this day doesn't want to take responsibility for any of it. And I was a small child. I was a girl. And so the sanctity of my womanhood was never protected, which, yes, that infuriates me to this day. But what I'm saying is the lack of follow-up care. There was no compassion, no love, no tender touching, no stroking of the hair or hairbrushing or having a book read to me or getting tucked in at night. I was just sent away. And that really disturbs me because I was a disturbed person for most of my life. And I cling to those things now. I cling to having my own space and wanting to take care of myself and treating myself right and making sure other people know that I have boundaries. But it took me decades to do that. And it took me going through intense counseling twice a week for 7 years to find out that I was getting nowhere with the counseling, because I would talk to the counselor, but I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't unload anything. No one knew about the SA, the sexual assaults, the incestuous assaults on my person as a small girl. And they didn't know about anything that was happening when I was in foster care or the orphanage I was put in or the women's prison I was put in or the jail that I was sent to when I was underage for no reason, because I wouldn't talk, because I was quiet. And when something went wrong, I was blamed for it, even if it wasn't my fault. And because my parents were much older, I took the brunt of a lot of people's anger of what other people had done. And so I learned to see and hear everything and hold everyone's secrets, only to be told later I was a liar, a thief, a whore, a slut, and I was a bad person for speaking the truth. And so I became readily the scapegoat before I was even 5 years old. And that has impacted me drastically in a negative way. And that's what I'm saying, is the fact that when children are around violence in the home, when they're around someone who says they don't care, that they don't love you, that you're the problem, that you're never going to amount to anything, those things will affect that person for the rest of their life. And in order to turn it around, there has to be an unconditioning of those behaviors. And as adults, it's hard to hear that we need to stop thinking about ourselves when we have our children, and we need to think about our children. And it's their emotions that are fragile when they're being modeled these behaviors. When we think, it's okay if we hop in the car and smoke a cigarette and our kids are in the car, they're going to think it's okay to hop in the car and smoke a cigarette around their children. Even though it smells nasty, it affects them because there's carbon monoxide in there.
Carbon dioxide.
And they smell bad. They stink from the smoke. And people just don't care. or they drink around their kids, or they do drugs around their kids, or they have a different boyfriend or a different girlfriend every week, and they say, oh, that's okay. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt them. It's my behavior, not theirs. They're not doing it, but it does affect them. It will affect them for the rest of their life, and they will walk around wondering, why did no one care about me? How come no one put a stop to this? What's wrong with me? Learning to overcome obstacles in one's life takes experience, especially when there's been a difficult time or a hardship. But when we're talking about abuse, neglect, physical abuse, isolation,
childhood trauma,
racial slurs towards a child,
narcissistic control,
a person learns that they feel like they are the problem. Either life is unfair, or they really are bad, or they become just like their
negatively modeled behavior.
Abusers. They become like the predators around them.
Risk takers and unhealthy
around
relationships.
Those that are forcing their beliefs on that person. Take it from someone who knows. I was raised around people that were
controlling,
a military mindset,
manipulative,
they were hardcore, and they
forceful,
wanted to make everybody
pay the
toe
big
the
price.
line. You know, the good old boy,
you get what you get
type attitude where
I'm right and you're wrong.
If you don't fit what they believe and how they act and what they do, then you just don't fit in. And it was unfortunate for me because I was a kid.
You'll get hurt if you don't listen.
There was something wrong with the way everyone was acting. When I would get in trouble, my dad would twist my finger or twist my ears or hurt me in ways that you don't hurt small children, and especially girls. You just don't do those things, but I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal for my dad to effeminize me when I was a girl and tell me I was the boy that he never had.
Masculinizing abuse.
And I walked around in a daze all the time. And then I started to become bullied at school. And kids picked on me because I looked different. But I heard the racial slurs at home.
I was told I was a boy and they cut all my hair off.
And then years later, having a DNA test, finding out that there's a possibility of infidelity in one of my parents, that my DNA was a slap into the face of those who racial slurred me their whole life. I was like the redheaded stepchild. At the same time, I was disgusted by the comments, but I was a kid. And so everywhere I went, I was bullied because I looked different. I was silent because of the abuse. I walked around in a fog, not knowing how to respond to people in an appropriate way. It was hard for me to make friends because I was shifted from house to house and from school to school. And so I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to talk to people. And I was afraid of everyone in a way that I was confident, but I was also afraid of making connections because everyone was hurting me wherever I went.
Plus, I was a scapegoat.
And I was ignored.
And continually traumatized.
Which created a huge rift for me in my young adulthood and later in life.
Being very withdrawn and introverted.
I didn't make eye contact with people. I didn't hold hands with people I dated. I didn't have intimate conversation with them. I didn't let them in my bubble. I didn't let them know anything about me.
I told everyone nothing about me. Even my children knew nothing.
And looking back on that, it's a shame. It's a shame that anyone would have to go through that. But we must remember that toxic cycles are modeled to us. They don't have to be our lifestyle. We can break free from that. We can learn from the past and heal ourselves by making an effort to do so.
The first step is awareness.
When I think about issues such as a child being abused, that would include physical abuse, sexual abuse, food insecurity,
Psychological abuse.
neglect, trauma.
Manipulation.
There's nothing a child can do about it.
We must treat our children with
But
love.
when adults allow these things to go on, it makes you wonder, is it ignorance or is it desensitization to the problem?
Hurt people do
And
hurt
I would have to
people.
say that it's a combination of both. A lack of wisdom, knowledge, a lack of education,
Lack of support
Or-
and negative emotional reaction.
the fact that they've been around this for so long that they don't know what to do. They literally don't know how to move either way.
Negative modeled
And it takes
behavior.
someone from the outside, most oftentimes, to turn on the light bulb, to change the scenery.
Reach out for
to
help.
Create a wake-up call.
Before it's too late.
To be the one to stomp the feet.
Therefore, creating
To
positive
scream and
change.
yell. Or to sit down
Helping
with
break
someone and say,
toxic
hey,
cycles.
this is just not okay. Why is this happening? And it's more often than not that I've seen women complain
Allowing the
and
cycle
say, I
to
don't
continue.
want
Your advice is unneeded.
your insight. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't need you to tell me what to do. But they're on social media complaining about how they have
And
too
they're
many
allowing their
kids,
partners to
that
abuse
they
their
can't
children.
finish school, that they haven't gone to high school, and they haven't gotten their GED, and they can't find a job, and their husband is lazy, or their boyfriend keeps cheating on them, but they allow it to continue to go on. And you'd have to wonder what gives, what's going to change, what can change within us to help someone else.
Before
When they say,
it's too
I don't
late.
need any advice from you. And you're really not giving them any advice. You're rising above your own situation and you're learning how to cope. You're learning how to heal. You're learning how to step forward, being an example to others.
Therefore, breaking the cycle of violence.
And a lot of times there's opposition from individuals
Targeted disbelief.
that sincerely do not want to change. They would rather grumble and moan and complain
Staying
than
stuck
to
in toxic
change
cycles.
their own situation. Welcome to the Wandering Dotterill.
Thanks, Spotify.
This is not a dream.